Thank you, Mark, and thank you, Mr. Representative Lee, Mr. Chairman of the committee, and all of the members of the committee. I feel compelled to disclose that I'm originally from Timbo, Arkansas, and I was born in Conway and lived the first few years of my childhood in Timbo. I had a case in Calico Rock several years ago, a homeschool case, and I called up a lawyer in Mountain View and asked them to be local counsel for me, and told them I'm a lawyer from Washington, D.C. But as I was originally from Timbo, she said, Lord have mercy, I didn't know anybody from Timbo. I could find Washington, D.C., and I didn't want to be a lawyer there. So it is an honor to be back in my home state and before this committee. Thank you so much for the opportunity to be here. The place I would like to start is with George Mason at the Constitutional Convention. At the end of the convention, the founders knew that they were going to need amendments from time to time when the structures of government proved to be insufficient to protect the liberties of the people. And Madison agreed that he would have an amending process. He just didn't want to use it the next 2 or 3 years until they had some experience under their belts. But the proposal on the table was to have all amendments be proposed by Congress and then ratified by the states. So that sounds nice and balanced until Mason stood up and said, look it guys, if we try to ever get an amendment that will be limiting the power of Congress, Congress will never propose an amendment to limit its own power. And I think that truth is self-evident, that Washington, D.C. will never deliberately give up its power. And what we have in this country is we have a loss of liberty and a government that is way out of control, particularly on the fiscal side of issues, because we don't have the right structures anymore. Most of politics seems to be battling about personalities, who should be elected in a particular office, so personalities, and then policy issues, and we've ignored what the founders thought was the most important, and that is right structure. Because the right structure, they believed, is essential to our liberty. Who makes the decisions for the education policy of Arkansas? Who should make the decision about the healthcare policy of Arkansas? Who should make the decisions about highway policy, about other issues? And the question that we're seeking to answer through the Article 5 process of the Convention of the States is to reorder not the substantive policies, but the who decides question. Who decides what issues in this country? And part of that is, another illustration, is should the president be able to legislate? I don't care if it's a Republican president or a Democrat president, all of them have used executive order power, and all of them have used regulatory power to legislate. And the plain fact is that the Hobby Lobby case that was before the Supreme Court that was using the Religious Freedom Restoration Act, that law was, which I personally named, and was the chairman of the group of the lawyers that wrote it, so I know some of the details about this. That law was used not in response to the actual Obamacare legislation, but by a regulation that was enacted by the Secretary of Health and Human Services on the abortion issue. Well, the abortion issue is an important issue, but I think the Founding Fathers believed, and I think most Americans believe, that our elected officials should make those kind of policy decisions, not bureaucrats. And because there's political responsibility for that. So the who decides question means legislators should make the law, the states should make the laws on the domestic issues that the states have jurisdiction over by the nature of the Constitution's original design. And the federal government should stick to its issues, and the executive branch should administer, the legislative branch should legislate, and the judicial branch should not legislate and should not seek to administer. That structural mess in Washington, D.C., I would submit, is the reason that we're facing the situation we're in. The Center for Public Integrity, and this is not a conservative organization, Arianna Huffington's on the board of the Center for Public Integrity, have used GAO statistics to report that in fiscal year 2020, 89% of all federal tax revenues will be spent on just 4 things: interest on the national debt, Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security. All military issues, every other issue the federal government thinks it's going to be spending money on is going to have to be crammed into 11% of spending in just 6 years. The idea that the states will be able to depend on federal funding for various things is an illusion. All that's going to be disappearing before we know it, because the runaway federal government is simply unsustainable. And so the question is, who can stop them? And the answer is, the legislatures are the only one that can stop them. Under Article 5, the legislatures are given the ability to control the process from beginning to end on all substantive points. The first step is to set the agenda. 34 states have to call a convention and agree on the subject matter. There have been 400 applications for a convention of the states in the history of the Republic. We've never had a convention because there's never been 2/3 of the states agree on the same subject matter. And so the agenda that we're seeking to have a convention of the states for is for the purposes of imposing fiscal restraints on the federal government, limiting the power and jurisdiction of the federal government, and imposing term limits on federal officials. And that would include both judges and the Supreme Court as germane topics to be discussed at the convention. So when 34 states agree on that agenda, and 3 already have, this application passed earlier this calendar year in Florida, Georgia, and Alaska. It got through the House in Alabama and in Arizona, got through committee in Missouri, and we ran out of time in those states. And we're going back this year, and we're making serious efforts in 20 other states, including Arkansas this year. Our hope is that it'll move in Arkansas after January. When 34 states agree on that language, then at the convention, it's one state, one vote. You draft the actual text of the amendments. You do that with the eye toward the third stage, which is 38 state legislatures that have to ratify. The idea that proposals that are on the extremes of either political philosophy can get through that is just simply political nonsense. You're going to require something to get through that whole maze of 34 states, then 26 states, then 38 states. Is going to have to be something that actually has the support of the vast majority of the American public. And I believe that imposing fiscal restraints on Washington, D.C. in some form has the vast majority of the American public. I believe that having better checks and balances on our courts, better checks and balances on Congress, and an increased, robust decision-making role for the states is something that all of us can agree on. We don't have to agree on policy issues, because this is about structure, not about policy. It's about where will the policy be decided. It really should not be a partisan issue. It should be in everyone's interest to have decisions made as close to the source of the people as possible, because we're all supposed to be thinking about what's best for the people. And what's best for the people is to have decisions made where the people have the best access. And that's here in Arkansas, or in Virginia, or Idaho, or wherever the individual citizen lives. So our goal is to preserve the liberty of this country by using the very process the founders intended. I know that this committee is well versed in the intricacies and the problems that go with Congress ordering this legislature around, and all the other legislatures as well. I just conceptually like to think of it, and then I'll stop and answer any questions that anybody has. When Congress is telling this legislature what to do, effectively, that's the voters of those states telling you what to do. The voters of California shouldn't be able to tell the legislators in Arkansas what to do. The voters in Massachusetts shouldn't be able to tell the legislators in Arkansas what to do. You're supposed to represent the people of Arkansas. And Article 4 of the Constitution has a Republican guarantee clause. Congress and the federal government is supposed to guarantee a Republican form of government. And what a Republican form of government, its most basic essence is this: the people of each state elect the people who make the laws of that state. And because of the way we're manipulating the general welfare clause and sending federal funds and supposed federal funds, which are really taxpayer funds, into the states to manipulate the outcomes of decisions at the state level, we're effectively ruining Republican government, because the voters of other states are telling the legislators in Arkansas what to do. This will put an end to that. It will give this state an opportunity to put an end to that. And I would say with that with that constitutional authority comes constitutional responsibility. You're the only ones with the authority to save the country, and I would hope that you would use that as the legislature takes on its new session starting in January. And again, thank you for the opportunity to be here, and I hope you have questions, and I'm prepared to answer pretty much anything you'd ask.
Thank you very much.